Hello, welcome to today's broadcast. It might be a little bit noisy, but I missed you all from what would have been yesterday for me and maybe midday for you guys. I'd like to talk about the news, the sources that say Trump is insisting that no parallels be drawn between the end of his the end of his tenure in office and Nixon. Nixon, whose Watergate crimes and taping people in his office are crimes of corruption and manipulation that still now seem pale next to the death toll associated with Trump's malevolent negligence and COVID death toll, which is likely to be 500,000 people potentially by February or April, just because of the continuing disinclination of Trump supporters to comply with mask wearing or any steps to acknowledge the pandemic is real and that risks need to be mitigated against, together with the corrosive effect that has on compliance amongst people who aren't even Trump supporters. Because commitment to fighting an invisible foe is something that needs broad, widespread, clear instructions and strong encouragement from levels of leadership at all levels of government. And at the top of the government, at the supreme office in American politics, there is someone who willfully and purposefully discouraged Americans from wearing masks, which were the precursor to vaccines, complement the action of vaccines when available, and would have saved tens of thousands of American lives, if not hundreds. Imagine if the US Postal Service had been allowed to proceed with their original plan of distributing 5 masks to every American household in April of 2020. Hello, Alan. Hello, Mark. Hello, Molly. Nice to see you. So what I would like to share with you now is just this photo from an NBC article, because it's very striking to me. The title of this article is "Some Democrats in Congress Are Worried Their Colleagues Might Kill Them." So it's important for me to anchor our conversation in reflections on that topic, because it's easy to get distracted with combating the disinformation propagated by Republicans. But I like to anchor our conversation in what we know to be true, generally speaking, and not talk too much about the deflections that they put forward. And this photo is very vivid and very evocative in that it shows a knot of Trump rioters, and one of them is using a stick to try and poke police officers, jab, assault, and somebody else has a crutch raised above their head to strike officers. And there is a Washington Post article today that talks with some of those Metropolitan Police, which are featured in that doorway. So that article is called "We Got to Hold This Door: How Battered DC Police Made a Stand Against the Capitol Mob." And I'll share that with you as well, because that also, the photography there is very vivid and evocative. Kimchi, have I not made you a moderator yet? Because I can. And I will. And then you will be able to mute or block the disturbing troll people. Okay. Well, while I do that, though, I'll pull up the Washington Post article so that you can begin to check out the details visible in this next photo. So that's "We Got to Hold This Door." And the person you can see there is DC police officer Michael Fanoni, if that's how you pronounce his name. And let's see I don't know how clear that is to you, but the terror on his face is very evident. And he's surrounded by some people who may be reaching out an arm protectively, and others who are likely to be trying to hit him. And he had a mild heart attack. He was exposed to bear repellent sprayed by the Trump rioters, and poked and had his helmet and badge stripped from him, and he fell into unconsciousness as he was being beaten, and said he could hear chants of USA, USA, and also "We got one, kill him with his own gun." So I'll show you where it says that. So from his account, he was telling his fellow officers to dig in. They were defending the West Terrace doors. They didn't know that the Capitol had already been breached from other entrances. So to their mind, this was a last stand against incursion into the Capitol building, and they were preventing rioters from making their first entrance into the building. So for them, it was a last stand for law and order in the United States against an overrunning of the Capitol building. So he, according to his own account, said, "Dig in, we got to get these doors shut." Boys, you have to turn the sound down because that's way too noisy. Thank you. So he's been an officer since 9/11, 40 years old, has 4 daughters, has been working on a crime suppression detail in another part of the district, but he and his partner sped to the Capitol when dispatchers broadcast an urgent citywide emergency call. Thank you, darling. That's a nice shirt. The officers at the West Terrace eventually pushed people away from the doors, but then saw the immense volatile crowd stretched up in front of him and realized what police were up against. So they spent hours battling people to prevent ingress into the Capitol through those West Terrace doors. So somebody unmuted him. Ooh. It ain't over till God says it's over. And what do you think God is likely to say about the events of the insurrection? Do you feel that God is in support of the insurrection? Do you feel that God is compelling you yourself to participate in violence? Because if your God is telling you to do that, I would advise you to seek professional help. Yes, Michael Fanoni did not die, although it's likely to be his unconscious body pictured in photographs from above of an unconscious police officer splayed on the steps of the Capitol in front of the West Terrace doors whilst being beaten by people with American flagpoles. But yes, Officer Brian Sidnick died on the day of those events, and the next day a second police officer died from his own hand. Stephanie's here, Kevin's here. Hello, thank you. I'm well, yes. Popping in and out, no worries, Kim. And Molly's here as well. She's a moderator too, I believe. And Stephanie, are you a moderator too? And am I pronouncing your name properly? I hope I am. So, excellent. So Fanoni says, we weren't battling 50 or 60 rioters in this tunnel. In the first public account from DC police officers who fought to protect the Capitol during last week's siege, he says, we were battling 15,000 people. It looked like a medieval battle scene. Someone in the crowd grabbed Fanoni's helmet, pulled him to the ground, and dragged him on his stomach. All right, well, that's enough. The only reason I dwell on that is because, from my perspective, it is part of the hope that people have to deprogram, decultify Trump supporters so that they once again believe in communal regard, looking out for other people in order to protect them from, say, a deadly pandemic. Because a pandemic gives people the tools to potentially kill their fellow citizens indirectly. So when you have a president who has been cultivating extreme aggression and hatred, by overinflating risks, misdescribing what is a threat to the United States and to the safety and prosperity of the people of the United States, pretending that there's a threat from communism, pretending that his opponents are lying, pretending that Democrats are terrible people, that the press is enemy of the state, etc. When you have somebody deliberately ratcheting up rhetoric to present his opponents as enemies of the state, then you have people who are even happier than normal to cause harm to others. And I think there already was a degree of willingness to harm others, because there's a lot of self-contempt in the American psyche. Not self-contempt, self-contempt on a national level. So Americans know that there's high levels of obesity in their nation, and they know some people don't necessarily take care of their bodies, and that can potentially inconvenience others. And they have contempt for those people, but it means they have contempt for their own country. I mean, to my mind, you don't have contempt for others unless you feel disempowered. So some people have felt disempowered by the inclusive, body positive rhetoric that says it's okay to be fat and you don't have to be ashamed. And they've been all, hey, we want to be ashamed. We want you to be shamed into better complying with the science of physical fitness, etc., the science of physical health. And people who are body positive usually put a high premium on psychological and emotional health and think that it's more important to embrace and accept who you are rather than embark on potentially volatile dieting practices. Now, those are just different prioritizations, but I would argue that there is this decades-long cultivation of a polemic of shame with a dichotomy of two different opposing positions on the topic of physical health and how people should approach that. Cybergrief would like to know how you change Trump supporters' minds. Well, it's like anything to do with addicts. You don't fix addicts. They arrive at the point where they begin to want to fix themselves, but you help incentivize them by interventions, by being honest and telling them the harm that they are causing to you and the harm that you perceive them to be causing to themselves. But until they resolve to recognize it, until they let go of their own attachment to being right about the things they thought they were right about, we've truly seen the strength of people's attachment to their own opinions. And people who have bought into the QAnon theories that Trump's opponents are a part of an international cabal of Satan worshippers who traffic children, and that he's the only person willing to oppose child trafficking and human trafficking in general, then they'll have an intensity to their convictions. And if they lack the intellectual humility to ever question their convictions and their sources of information, then the problem continues. So the broad scale deprogramming of Trump, the broad deprogramming of Trump is more of a natural process that occurs, and some of them are arrested. Now, when tech accounts such as Twitter kick Trump off the platform, they will try to use that to feed into their narrative of, international cooperations of Satan worshippers are harassing Trump, and they are the true Nazis in this situation because they're oppressing him and denying Trump his free speech rights. The interesting counterpoint to that is to say, and how do you feel about the golf tournament, the PGA, stripping Trump businesses of their ability to hold golf tournaments? Is that also communist and repressive in nature? To which they'd probably reply, yes, it's all part of communism and the hate campaign against our wonderful, devoted, selfless president who gave up his life of luxury for a life of pomp and veneration as POTUS. funny that people trying to take over the Capitol and wanting to kill legislators. Yes, very much wanting to kill legislators. So Democrats are in fear for their lives in Congress. People like AOC said it was uncomfortable during the siege because she was fearful that some of her colleagues might want to disclose her location to the rioters in order to expose her to harm or even death. And it's believed that Madison Cawthorn was carrying a weapon on the day of the siege, and also that Congresswoman Lauren Boebert from, where's she from? Is she from, let's find out. Not that it's terribly relevant. There are QAnon extremists now, not just in all corners of the United States, but in countries around the world. Colorado, okay. Lauren Boebert's from the state of Colorado, and she tweeted, today is 1776, on the morning of January the 6th. There's a misdated photograph circulating on the internet that says this is Lauren with some white supremacists on January the 5th, but it's actually a photo from 2019. But what is true is that those reporters are posing with Lauren Boebert, and many of them are making a white power gesture. So the governor of Pennsylvania is wearing body armor now. Yes, and some of the Republican Congress members who voted to impeach Trump have invested in body armor for themselves now. Which brings me to a comment from a professor of sociology and international affairs at Princeton University called Kim Lane Sheppel, who studies how democracies slide into authoritarianism. She said the atmosphere in Congress is disturbingly similar to those in governments in which dissident politicians live in fear of death threats, including fears that pro-regime extremists might target them with tacit support from government leaders or state security. She said, in an atmosphere of threat, a lot of people quit. By the time you're at the end game, you only have the people who say they refuse to be bullied and will risk their lives, and those that are so bullied they can't even open their mouths. So those Republicans who may have wanted to impeach Trump but didn't want to expose themselves or their families to the potentially violent wrath of Trump supporters, and therefore did not vote to impeach Trump. And yes, comes the moment, comes the hour, comes the hero. Is there a quote like that? Whose living room is that behind you? Looks like a great setup. Why wouldn't you assume it's my beautiful living room, green screen living room? I consider it to be a pleasant privacy screen. It allows my family members to pass by my broadcast without being in the frame too much. I don't have a private office. I'm very much in the middle of things. And who's from Georgia? Because it's not me. I'm not from Georgia. I'm potentially going to hail from Massachusetts if everything works out. And look, can we just mute this dude before he even starts talking? Because he's going to whine about his First Amendment rights being impinged upon because he doesn't understand what First Amendment rights involve. And also, he's annoying, and I'm perfectly within my rights. I know, but I'm just wanting to mute you before you even start with me today. You're irritating and distracting, and you've obstructed enough of my broadcast now that basically I see your title and I want you to be muted on site. And I want you to be, well, I don't really care whether or not you're annoyed by it, but it would only be fair for you to experience a degree of personal frustration equivalent to the degree of frustration elicited by me from having your unsolicited disinformation streams featuring on my broadcast. So you get muted on site. I'm just giving my heads up to my moderators. If you also, you think he was being I know, but he's a bad person. If you're a bad person, Ninja Buddha, who's resolved to become better, and you can say something to that effect, then maybe I won't ask people to mute you on side. But I've seen enough nonsense from you now that I am uninterested in entertaining or tolerating it anymore. The one who says she will impeach Joe, that's Melissa Green something, isn't it? Marjorie Taylor Greene. I don't know if she is from Georgia. I think she might be from Arizona. But I didn't realize she's also, I wonder how the defamation lawsuit has worked out. Oh no, she's from Georgia, you're right. Not Arizona. The place where they got that information is from a story today about Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump, who wouldn't allow Secret Service agents to use any of the 6 bathrooms in their home, 6.5 bathrooms. And so they had to rent a porta potty at one point, and that porta potty was put on the pavement outside Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump's home in New York. Residents eventually objected to having a porta potty on the pavement in their neighborhood, and at that point the Secret Service agents were reduced to driving to visit local restaurants every time they needed to use the facilities. And eventually, that arrangement, I imagine, was very unsatisfactory. They used the houses of neighbors of Ivanka Trump and Jared Kushner, which included President Obama and Michelle Obama and their house. And that was until that arrangement was terminated after some of the Secret Service agents apparently left Obama's bathroom in a mess. Perhaps one of them was a pro-Trump Secret Service agent who purposely messed up their bathroom or didn't flush the toilet. 6.5 bathrooms. All right, let's have a look at that story. Jared Kushner, Ivanka Trump, bathrooms. Might be a Vanity Fair story. I don't know who broke it. Well, everybody's reporting on it. I guess it's going to be a popular story because it talks about poop. And we as human beings are interested in the secret lives of others. So yes, eventually, yes, at that part of the story, after the arrangement was terminated for using the Obama toilets, then a neighbor who had a granny flat out the back of one of her tenants' properties, a small bathroom area, agreed to rent out or sublet that part of the, actually no, sublet would be if the tenant sublet it. So the landlord agreed to rent this small bathroom area to the Secret Service agents, a neighbor of Jared and Ivanka, and her tenant agreed to that as long as the rent for his property was reduced. And yes, and that cost $3,000 a month. And so over the tenure of Trump's time in office, has cost $144,000 to the taxpayer to rent a neighborhood bathroom area to Secret Service agents looking after Jared and Ivanka Trump and their family. So this is not a parody. This is a true story. I can bring it up on screen if you like. Let's have a look. There's any number of outlets reporting on it. Should we look at the CNN one? Ivanka Trump on Vanity Fair. They probably have more interesting details. So, Ivanka and Jared Kushner made their Secret Service detail go to extreme lengths to find a bathroom. Everybody remembers that picture of Ivanka looking as if she's wearing a sanitary pad to the wedding of Prince Harry and actress and now Duchess of Cambridge, Meghan Markle. What's Meghan's name? Meghan Markle? 6.5 bathrooms in their house, leading the group of people tasked with protecting their lives to spend months searching for a reliable restroom to use on the job. At first setting up a porta potty on the sidewalk and then using a bathroom in a garage at the nearby house of Barack and Michelle Obama. But then they left an unpleasant mess, or some Secret Service supervisor from the Trump-Kushner detail left an unpleasant mess in the Obama bathroom at some point before the fall of 2017. Then agents began driving a mile to use Mike Pence's house at the Naval Observatory, where they had permission to use a standalone guard station. But if they didn't have time to drive a mile to use the bathroom, they relied on the hospitality of nearby restaurants. At this point, it feels important to pause and just reflect on the fact that a bunch of Secret Service agents were knocking on the doors of local businesses, probably bashfully asking, so sorry to bother you, but would it be possible to use your bathroom? All because Trump and Kushner think other people are beneath them and shouldn't be allowed to use their monogrammed towels. It's the first time I ever heard of a Secret Service detail having to go to these extremes to find a bathroom. So, yes, has cost the taxpayer 6 figures so far, $144,000 for renting. It has a house across the street from Trump and Kushner has a basement unit, including a bathroom that is accessible from the rear. And she broke that space off, a lady called Kay Kendall, and ran the idea by the house's tenant, former Connecticut Congressman Anthony Moffat Jr. So there you go. I wonder if that former Connecticut congressman is Republican or Democratic, but it hardly matters. But it is very disrespectful to working people and specifically to working Secret Service members. And yet some of them no doubt will be still Trump cultists who will take any amount of poor treatment and as people do in abusive relationships and still hold fast to their conviction that the relationship is special and worth promoting and prioritizing above all else. Everybody's either been in a destructive relationship or potentially seen a friend in a destructive relationship where their understanding of reality has diverged so far from everybody else's version of reality that people are tempted to hold an intervention and say, but can't you see they're no good for you? At which point they will have excuses. Oh no, they're really good. They really love me and I can help them. And they might break up, but then get back together again. You know, all manner of dysfunction is attendant on bad relationships. And Trump cultists are in a bad relationship with Trump where it's not even necessarily that they love Trump. They just hate giving up their conviction that they were right. It's not as if Trump has helped them. He's essentially cursed the land of the United States by under-responding to a deadly pandemic that has not only ravaged the physical health of Americans, but also the American economy. So job losses have ratcheted up over the last few months as a consequence, no doubt, of increasing pandemic numbers that we don't hear about as much as we need to in the media because of the drama and the dynamics of Trump attempting to overthrow the government via inciting his followers to attack the Capitol and try and kill or take Mike Pence hostage and attack members of Congress. If we go and look at some of the speech that Donald Trump gave, we would see some of that inflammatory language. I'm glad you caught me live too. Yes, let us watch a little bit of Biden's speech, because that will be something positive to see. And Biden's been communicating his plan very well of a relief, what did he call it? American relief, I think, in which he describes how giving people stimulus checks and investing in businesses and all of those types of things will help to restore the economy. Okay, so I've got here highlights of President-elect Biden's COVID relief bill, which he will unveil tonight. Total price tag $1.9 trillion, which we don't care about anymore, because we understand now that if you let your country go off the rails economically, then it can't generate value. If you have a country that's adept at generating value, that rewards entrepreneurs and attracts quality migrants, then your country is worth investing in, and you can obtain access to capital at interest rates that are not extortionate. But if you let your country run down because you're pursuing austerity and libertarian style, every man for himself ideology, then your country becomes less capable of generating value. Okay, so for individuals, $1,400 stimulus checks, boost child tax credit to $3,000 per child, and $3,600 for children under 6, implement federal $15 minimum wage, end tipped minimum wage. I don't know what that means. Does that mean people being able to bypass minimum wage mandates if tips are involved? Increase unemployment insurance up to $400 per week, up from $300. Stop COVID-related evictions and put $30 billion towards additional rental assistance funding. $25 billion for childcare centres, provide expanded 14 plus weeks of paid sick, family and medical leave. And to stop COVID-19, $160 billion for national vaccination program, $50 billion to expand COVID testing, set up 100,000 public health jobs corps for contact tracing and vaccine education. It's a new deal. Employ everybody to help educate each other about the pandemic and about the need to vaccinate. $170 billion for schools, reduce class sizes and modify spaces, improve ventilation. Yes, hire more janitors, provide summer school or other support. $35 billion for public colleges, including community colleges, as well as HBCUs. Is that historically black colleges and universities? And MSIs. What are MSIs? For small businesses and communities, $15 billion for 1 million of hardest hit small businesses. So stopping those businesses from going under, because once the pandemic pushes them over the cliff of fiscal viability, it's much harder to get them back. And that falling off the cliff exerts a downward pull on economic activity. If a waitress keeps all of her tips, she's cut off at $3.45 per hour. Lordy. Ninja Buddha's come back on another platform, but look, on that platform, I can do things like block user or put user in timeout. I'll show you what he said though. He said, how can anyone take you seriously after you have people censored just like big tech? I'll tell you how. Some people's relentless commitment to disinformation is a precursor to planning insurrection, violent insurrection. So because we didn't ban you earlier, I mean, I banned you, I would mute you or block you if I saw somebody like you, but because big tech, more broadly speaking, did not effectively ban neo-Nazis, QAnon cultists, and off-the-edge Trump supporters who supported the big lie of a stolen election that was proven to be untrue in multiple court cases. 62 court cases were lost trying to provide support that didn't exist for that particular lie. The violence that was like a suppurating pustule, that the pus that emanated from the squeezed pimple of psychological campaigns against Americans, that gullible, selfish, intellectually arrogant people who are too stupid to realize when they're being tricked, or not necessarily stupid, just too vulnerable to believing themselves to be superior, with superior access to information and knowledge, and too arrogant to question their sources or to seek a broader media diet. You have all contributed to a violent attack on the capital of the United States and a attempted overthrow of the American government that was very nearly much more deadly than the death of 5 people, that could have involved the death of tens or even hundreds of legislators and their staff in the Capitol building. So that is why we exclude you. It's because you don't deserve to be on social media distributing your lies, which are a precursor to more violence and dysfunction. And now I put you in timeout with the click of a button. Do better, know better. I will exclude you every time I see you, because pretending that it is somehow persecution to be censored when your rhetoric has contributed to the violent death of a police officer, as well as the near-death experiences of multiple legislators and terrified staff members in the Capitol building. It's not my business to force you to understand that. I can't hold your head under a tap of truth. That's something for you, like any other addict, to untruth and to lies. That's for you to reach in your own time. So this is the timeout button. All right. The $15 an hour shouldn't kill it, because I know a lot of people have been very exposed to the idea that $15 minimum wage will kill businesses. Actually, it will, and research has shown over time in multiple countries that having a reasonably livable minimum wage actually gives you more customers with money to spend in your business. So whilst some businesses might need initial protective payments, which they can maybe get through COVID payments, to help them adjust to a new arrangement of paying their workers a livable wage, it's not the death to businesses that Americans are often indoctrinated to believe. It is a green screen background. Thanks for asking. Ninja needs to learn a lot of things. I'm glad you enjoy me telling people off. I'm master of my domain, and I'm familiar with the origins of that conversation. Bernie Sanders supports Joe Biden's plan. And what's interesting is the Chamber of Commerce also does as well. So Joe Biden has hit a sweet spot of societal dysfunction pursuant to Trump's criminal negligence that has helped people, more and more people, recognize the necessity for allowing people to have enough money to live. And that a functional government of a wealthy country can do more to safeguard its citizens at a public health level and at an economic level by facilitating disaster relief payments and facilitating the mandating of a livable minimum wage. So I am actually very fundamentally opposed to Bernie Sanders' behavior in general, because I think his commitment to self-promotion caused him to be a significant factor in Donald Trump's questionable election win of 2016, because I've listened to interviews with Bernie Sanders from 2017 in which he was questioned over the date at which he became aware that Russian-based accounts were disparaging Hillary Clinton on the Bernie Sanders Facebook page to other Bernie Sanders supporters. And that he says he was made aware by staff members in May and in September that they thought they were Russian accounts calling Hillary Clinton a murderer. And the interviewer of Vermont Radio asked Bernie Sanders to take a listener question, which said, "Why didn't you go public with that knowledge that you had gained from your staff?" Because Hillary Clinton was telling people that Russia was interfering and Russia was attacking and undermining her campaign. And people discounted her account of that situation because they perceived it to be self-serving, and she didn't have corroborative details from, say, her former political rival, Bernie Sanders. And when he was asked why he didn't speak to that, he first of all said the responsibility lay only with Hillary Clinton's campaign for telling the public that there was Russian interference. And secondly, he shut the question down by saying, "We knew what we knew when we knew it, and that's all I have to say on that." So, to people who have not realized yet the degree of culpability that Bernie Sanders has in potentially venerating himself as the messiah of the American economy, that only he could help save America and Hillary Clinton couldn't. Therefore, he took it upon himself to not support her account of what he also knew was happening about Russian interference. He took it on himself to not help her win the election, to not back up her version of events. Thomas agrees with livable wages, but some jobs were never meant to be jobs of livable means. Why not? Why not? Why shouldn't any job performed by a human being involve that human being being allowed to live and support themselves? Oh. Bye, darling. Can you tell Daddy goodbye from Mummy? Is he going out for coffee? Yeah, she doesn't want to get any presents before her birthday. She's a big stickler for that. Okay. Yes, restaurant wage jobs should be minimum wage. I actually don't know what Daddy might be talking about a secret. Are you okay?
No, I'm going at the thing.
I know, I'm just saying goodbye. But I don't know what you're talking about with regards to presents. What are you talking about?
It's the play stuff.
Oh, it's arrived. Oh, well, maybe they can open the one from Maya now. Did both sets arrived?
No, I already know because both sets have arrived, but I don't want to open. But what about the other present for her?
Oh, that's a swimming costume. Remember the one she liked last time that she wore? Oh, that's it.
I guess she knows both her presents.
Yeah, now she knows both.
So now it's not a real birthday.
Well, it's a real birthday, just not as surprising. Do you want to do some flags with your friend? This has got all these flag stickers in it. Look, Ava might like it. She will. I don't want anybody to get bonked on the head.
Want some flag stickers? Ava.
Would you be prepared to say in an unqualified fashion that only teenagers are employed in fast food part-time jobs? Is that your position? Because I assure you, people are employed in fast food jobs who are not teenagers and who seek to support a family and who seek to support themselves. Thomas, if you investigate what happens in other countries, there are reasonable minimum wages. Oh, this is my practice for being political, isn't it? If I want to ever go into politics in the United States, I have to learn to disagree with people in a more smiling fashion and just go, well, perhaps you're right. But the information I've come across suggests a different scenario in which in Australia we have high-level minimum wages. I believe it's $17 an hour, which is probably not that dissimilar from $15 American an hour. And we also still have those computer touchscreen terminals. So people in the United States have said, look, states that have increased their minimum wage, that's responsible for these touchscreen terminals because McDonald's has resorted to this technology as a consequence of people pushing up the minimum wage. Now, I assure you, we have those touchscreen terminals in Australia. They are a function of technological advances and not a function of increase in minimum wages. It's very possible to live in other countries and continue to be devoted to the same convictions that you had that originated in your country of origin. So it's perfectly possible to go to other countries and still go, I am very loyal to what I think, and I will not register the data points or the circumstances of other countries as being of any significance whatsoever. All right, let's go look at some more things. Maybe we can even hear a little bit of Joe Biden's speech. I have not lived in the United States, but I'm aware of the increase in minimum wage at through various state governments, and that has resulted in in reduced levels of impoverishment in those states. And it's something that the Trump administration tried to take credit for and say, look at this reduction in poverty and this increase in wages for people under my tenure, but it hasn't happened uniformly across the board. It's been state specific, and having federal legislation that mandates a consistent minimum wage, whilst it will employ some change and people can point to change and say, look at these difficulties associated with change. Change-related obstacles and change-related challenges are not an argument for resisting improvement, although it is a common refrain of conservatives who habitually resist change because it's innate to conservative positions. And that's okay too. It's okay to have a yin and yang of political pulls, to have one side that says pursue justice and pursue equality and pursue opportunity for people and pursue government facilitation of all of those things, and for another side to say, make sure people realize they also have a role to play in the outcomes of their own life. And it's not just about what the government can do for you, it's also about what you can do for yourself, and to be to resist the destabilizing nature of untrammeled change. So you can have change, and you can also acknowledge that change inherently involves some destabilization and some adjustments. Yes, a higher minimum wage would increase economic stimulus, and I am an intended resident of the United States. We have our visas. We're just waiting for the United States to stop being overrun by a controllable pandemic that has been uncontrolled because of the libertarian and criminal tendencies of the current administration, together with Trump-affiliated Republican governors and just Republican tendencies in general to resist economic stimulus for the working and middle class. I'm glad you acknowledged that the federal minimum wage is currently way too low. And with any luck, rather than saying it as an absolute that small businesses will certainly go out of business, you could be an advocate for minimum small businesses to receive government support to help with any of the challenges and difficulties of transitioning to a higher federal minimum wage. And it's been seen now that the federal government has the capacity to borrow money at low interest rates and to use that money to cushion and subsidize the activities of powerful corporate interests, but that it's also possible to use some of that same low interest borrowed money to cushion and protect the interests of small businesses. Alan points out that should you derive huge value from my broadcast and wish to bring yourself the joy of my small business, small self-employed business, that I have a Patreon account that I am not terribly desperate to add to, but if it would bring you joy to support me, then that is the method, patreon.com/davchat. That's me, and I am grateful to all of the people who do have the capacity and the inclination to promote my work in that way. Yes, it's a whole industry now of trying to deprogram Americans on the topic of vaccination and on the topic of taking steps as individuals to reduce community levels of viral transmission. People need to get better quality masks and to resolve to wear them. People need to participate in information outreach events in their communities, to share flyers, to stick up posters that show how remaining in a protective bubble of reduced social interaction can reduce opportunities that the virus has to spread, which is of particular concern at the beginning of Biden's tenure, because not everybody will know about the new variant of COVID-19 that has already been detected in the US that is even more contagious and potentially more detrimental to children's health. That's sweet that you're trying to be reasonable. I too am trying to be reasonable. So we have that in common. Jack Jack says hello. That's an interesting name. Hello, Jack Jack. And you are a small business owner. Do you personally fear that your business would go under with the introduction of a minimum wage? And do you have any confidence in the ability of a federal government under the Biden-Harris administration to offer your government, or with the assistance of a Democratic-dominated Senate, to use the power of the purse under Congress's authority to offer your small business the support that it might need to weather the transition to a higher level federal minimum wage? Do you feel that you have any confidence in that? Do you identify any obstacles in your ability to feel confidence about that? Is your concern that Joe Manchin might, the sort of Republican-leaning Democrat senator from, where's Joe Manchin from? Let's find out. West Virginia? Yes, West Virginia. Joe Manchin from West Virginia, do you think he might stymie stimulus payments? Because he did initially say that he was reluctant to participate in giving more stimulus, distributing more stimulus to the American people, but there was significant uproar in response to that position that he took, and as far as I understand, he has since backed down from that position. No, I'm absolutely not making minimum wage from Patreon tips. I am mostly a stay-at-home housewife and support network to a husband who makes more than minimum wage. So I'm not financially dependent on this. My personal societal outreach to help disseminate good quality information and analysis to Americans who have been struggling under the depredations of a massive public propaganda campaign under the helm of an authoritarian-leaning, criminal, kleptocratic government, namely the Trump administration. So some days, yes, you're fearful for the viability of your business. Some days you're not. Alan has a vaccine date, the April the 17th. Congratulations. I hope it works out. Molly asks, don't we just love those anti-maskers recording themselves fighting with store managers? Well, it shows that they have the strength of their convictions. which in a way shows that the societal factors that have helped these people become so committed to endangering others is not just the product of an individual's thoughts, but is a very reinforced position that they're taking because they've heard from multiple sources in the media, in conservative media, that wearing masks is anti-scientific and not useful. They've heard a lot of lies on the topic because whilst no double-blinded, gold standard randomized controlled trials have been conducted on a masked population and an unmasked population, there have been less controlled but more observational population level studies that show counties in the US where mask mandates were adopted have resulted in significantly lower levels of COVID cases and consequently death and chronic disease. And that's nice. Thomas pays more than the mandated minimum wage, but you're afraid that other businesses wouldn't be able to do what you do, or you're just too attached to opinions that you've heard reinforced from more than one source. Because everything that we believe to be common sense is typically just information we've heard from more than one trusted source, and by function of that repetition and exposure, we come to accept that as being an unchallengeable truth. The technology I'm using for this broadcast is I broadcast to Periscope, YouTube, and Twitch, and I use a broadcasting streaming platform. Dav, says Brisbane 1, Jesus died for our sins so we can repent and get right with God. And what do you think, Brisbane 1, is the fate that befalls people who don't look to Jesus for salvation? Do you believe that we are all consigned to hell? And what do you believe should happen to politicians that don't subscribe to Christian faith? Should they be cast out of politics? Should adherents of the Christian faith dominate politics and dominate political outcomes? What do you do with your faith, and what do you see as the limitations of your religious faith? Cybergrief says he's tired of financially well-off businesses afraid to pay their workers a living wage. Well, yes, we should point out that those very well-off businesses that don't pay the minimum wage typically have workers that require food stamps in order to subsist. And consequently, McDonald's and Walmart have their profits subsidized by the American taxpayer, because in order to have the physical energy to be able to eat enough to come to work and have the energy to fulfill their workplace requirements, people are using taxpayer-funded food stamps to consume enough calories to work in those work environments. Which means the substantial profits derived by the owners of Walmart and the owners of McDonald's are financed to a degree by American taxpayers. Oh, sweetie, do you think my opinion is derived in isolation? I just derive my opinion from multiple sources that are not limited to my own ideas, but I seek to consume a media diet and to have an evolving number of opinions. And this broadcast is a venue for me to circulate my opinions and be transparent as possible about some of the sources of my information if I think it has value for others. And people come here and listen because they too derive value from listening to me and engaging with my current opinions, which are, as most people are, evolving. But there's a continuum of openness to new information and new opinions, and that can be a function of intellectual humility. So whilst I have a degree of intellectual confidence, I also have adequate levels of intellectual humility, which propel me to seek new information and not just information which conforms to confirmation bias, which supports ideas I already have, which is a strength and probably one of the factors that draws people to this platform, specifically to this broadcast. Do I think now that Trump is social media stifled and that Biden will be president, that more people will wear masks? Yes, I think there are obstacles to persuading people to wear masks, but I think sometimes disinformation needs free-flowing current to sustain people's conviction. So when you keep hearing details about how hospitals are filling up, but you need to keep believing that masks don't help, you have to keep hearing from Trump. You have to keep seeing Trump without a mask, and you have to keep hearing Tucker Carlson or Sean Hannity speak disparagingly of masks. So we haven't stopped Tucker Carlson, we haven't stopped Sean Hannity yet, or Laura Ingraham, or Rush Limbaugh. They're still putting disinformation out into the public sphere, and that's the tip of the iceberg. I'm sure there are a plethora of other conservative disinformation media platforms as well that continue to sell people the untruth of anti-mask propaganda. But with Biden in office, I think that shift in power will definitely increase the level of consistency of message. And with something that's invisible like a pandemic virus, you need clarity of message, consistency of message, and thoroughness of message. So across the board, at every level of government, you need to keep hearing that masks work, that it's necessary, that people must incur a degree of personal inconvenience in order to prevent negative outcomes, not necessarily for themselves or even their immediate families, but for society more broadly, because COVID risks magnify and are exacerbated at certain population cul-de-sacs where the movement of people is prescribed. So in prisons and nursing homes and hospitals where people go and stay for considerable periods of time without moving. They just stay there and are more likely to get an infective dose that's significant enough to result in a severe case of COVID, because severity of COVID is implicated with the level of infective dose received. Did you accidentally mute Molly Allen? I'm glad you've remedied that. I know she won't take it to heart. Cybergrief says, I like your content, Dav Cat. You get it and are far more passionate about this country's dilemma, even more so than most I know. Yes, I would imagine most people in the world would not necessarily have devoted as many hours of their life as I have since Trump came to office to try and broadcast good quality information. But I'm unusual in that I have the liberty to do so. I have the financial family circumstances that render me comfortable enough to do this rather than derive gainful employment for 8 hours a day. And I also have the familial background with fascism, which also impels me to do this. And then the intellectual confidence that draws me to accepting a potential position as like as someone who mans the radio for the resistance, who says, this is resistance radio, this is where you come if you want to touch base with other sane, decent people who can see the perils of a untethered, immoral, untruthful administration. Timothy Snyder said, a post-truth presidency is a pre-fascist presidency. So the minute the media balked at calling Trump a liar, at the minute they began to say, Trump claims this, without informing the public that those were not statements anchored in truth to any degree. The minute Trump was able to do that as both a candidate for the president and as the president, America was set on the path to this fairly big picture, predictable, violent uprising. This is the direction that fascists go in. I made a video intimating as such in January of 2018 that went viral to a degree and was viewed by 500,000 people and gave me the confidence to know that I had an American audience out there should I choose to pursue it. That there were some people who had heard my words and thought, this lady is articulating our worst fears. My video was called Me and My Warning, and I just told people that fascist regimes don't like free and fair elections, and they don't tolerate them for very long. So there might be a period of being initially constrained, and then they'll pull out all the stops to try and derail an election. And with Trump, we saw that he tried to steal the election by virtue of appointing a corrupt postmaster general, a postmaster general, in this case, Louis DeJoy. There was a story today showing that the Trump administration took offline a website meant to help attract workers to be election monitors. Your neighbor friend died of COVID last month. Yes. And one of the distressing things about COVID is that hospital workers have reported people in hospital dying of COVID who fail to accept that they have COVID, who are still remonstrating aggressively with staff saying maybe they have lung cancer because it couldn't be COVID. They can't possibly be dying from COVID. Just give them some vitamins and they'll be fine because COVID is nothing. It's just the flu. It's just a cold. This shouldn't be happening to them. And they're angry, and that anger is getting vented at innocent healthcare workers who are trying to help, who are getting increasingly psychologically burnt out from the struggle of having to contend with a strong segment of the public who have been misinformed so heavily about the nature of the pandemic. And that information, to a large degree, was politically motivated from Donald Trump, who wanted to be, in the election, the candidate of happy places, a happy place where COVID isn't real, and the only real challenge is to persuade people to ignore COVID so that businesses can open up and economic activity can resume. A goal that was always an illusory promise to those people, because even when people do ignore the virus, pretend it doesn't exist, subscribe heavily to Trump's clearly communicated message that it was nothing to worry about, deaths and dysfunction follow those outcomes of ignoring and under-responding to the pandemic, meaning that people become fearful and continue to restrict economic activity. So economic activity becomes more volatile under Trump because the scenarios that he was selling to the American people were that he is the savior of the economy, but everybody else has to comply by disavowing the severity of the pandemic and removing from their faces any visual confirmation that the pandemic is a real threat. Because, I mean, I anticipated this not straight away. It probably took me a few months, actually, to be honest, because I remember now promoting face shields at one point because they would have had additional eye coverage as well as nose and mouth coverage. But the main thing you need to protect is your nose and mouth. Those are your main mucosal membranes through which the virus can exit your body and also gain ingress to your body. If you're uninfected, you can get infected through the mucosal membranes of your mouth and nose, but also your conjunctiva are mucosal membranes as well, and viral particles can enter through your eyes. So face shields are an extra layer of protection if you're already wearing a mask, but face shields do not in and of themselves consist of an adequate protective layer because there's a gap. If you had something at the bottom of your face shield, maybe, but what you really need is a reasonably tight seal around your face, where possible, multiple layers of non-woven fibers so that the little viral particles bounce around and get trapped in those non-woven fibers or woven fibers. Boston Tea Party, that's a troll, I remember them. Alan did the math. Oh my God, Alan did the math and I earn 1 cent an hour. That's quite disconcerting. But I'm not in this for the money. So Boston Tea Party, how are you, my old troll friend? White privileged, thumbs up, US popcorn. Your meaning is mysterious, troll, but if I was to just extrapolate from your previous utterances, I would imagine you're deriding me for being a social justice warrior who believes in the concept of white privilege at all. They did arrest John Sullivan. He's actually not a Black Lives Matter or a Biden supporter. He's a grifter who's been denounced by activist organizations for running multiple sock puppet accounts. And I can show you. Okay. He had a lot of different accounts online. All right. So John Sullivan, prior to his arrest today, went through various different accounts, and he changed one of his account names to Watch Riot Porn. So he was originally, account was called Anarchy Block, which means he was trying to infiltrate Antifa groups. But then he used the hashtag, "Our informants last night provided us this information. Looks like Antifa terrorists were plotting to destroy property last night." So he attended protests, Black Lives Matter protests, but he did so to try and make money from accounts which he ran called Watch Riot Porn. And look, that's what he was doing at the Capitol as well, was pretending to be a journalist, even though he didn't have any press credentials. He was videoing it, trying to tell police officers to abandon their posts just before Ashley Babbitt was shot. In fact, he probably played a role in Ashley Babbitt's death, because those Capitol Police were standing in front of a door that led to one of the houses of Congress. And protesters were trying to bash the windows behind their heads, window panes in a door. But at one point, those Capitol Police officers saw armed reinforcement arrive. They saw tactical officers from another agency. And they nodded at each other and said, "Let's go." And they moved away from the door. But in those moments where they moved away from the door before their positions were assumed by the heavily armed, semi-automatic weapon-holding tactical officers in riot gear, actually, no, not full riot gear, but in helmets and in black uniforms, the rioters succeeded in breaking through one window pane and boosted up Ashley Babbitt on their shoulders to try and crawl through that upper broken window pane. And as she got her head through that window pane, I mean, there were people there pointing out that on the other side of the door, there was someone with a gun pointed at that door who was a civilian-clad Capitol Police officer, I believe. And he shot her in the neck because she was preparing to get through that door. And once she did that, she could have then opened the doors for the others to come through, etc. So people said there was a gun, that officer was making the gun visible, pointing at the rioters. So yes, John Sullivan was there telling those Capitol Police officers, saying, "Please, there's more people coming. I don't want you to get hurt. Just go, guys. We'll make a path for you." So John Sullivan is definitely, yes, an agitator. His brother is heavily associated with the MAGA movement, but he himself concentrated his business in trying to infiltrate Black Lives Matter rallies and Black Lives Matter organizations. They warned each other about him. So this thread that I was showing you was published on Twitter on the 26th of November, 2020. So I'll go look at that thread. So, more warnings about John from protesters who have encountered him. In addition to SLC and PDX, I don't know what those protests are, but he was recently seen in DC during the week of the MAGA Million March. And they say, Chillong didn't read, John Sullivan, aka activist John, is not to be trusted in the PDX scene. He's an activist organizer originally from the Salt Lake City area. He's created inflammatory flyers that feed directly into right-wing talking points and distributed them through his dizzying web of burner accounts. He started he started trying to organize his own PDX events. Let's look up what PDX is. PDX protests.
Mommy, please. I got the heaven and everything.
Does that mean Oregon?
I got the heaven.
Maybe PDX stands for Oregon protests. All right. Let's keep looking. All right. So creating flyers to trick locals into thinking his events were being led by trusted organizers, swooping events, and bringing documentary crews to DAs. I reached out to some Utah people and got the real dirt. He sneaked into the details of a secret event. Personally, I don't think he's a cop-fed infiltrator, but you never know. Via my interactions with him, he came off as someone that was a bit lost and looking for a family following anywhere you can find it. Since being called out, John has rebranded one of his many Twitter accounts at Anarchy Block, previously at Black Fist News, to at Watch Riot Porn, and is now attempting to feed information to far-right propagandists. So I don't know that that's so much someone who's a bit lost as more somebody trying to find a source of grifting. The LA death rate is one person every 6 minutes, which is quite extraordinary. And this particular Trump insurrectionist is saying the working class is the savior of the economy and Trump wanted us to get back to work. He'd be one of those people who's like touch and go, either a Bernie Sanders cultist or a Trump cultist. But in this case, he's been exposed, he or she, but I'm guessing he, has been overly indoctrinated in Trump cultism instead of Bernie Sanders cultism. At least Bernie Sanders cultism is a little more economically reasonable, whereas people who support Trump really have got the short end of the stick. Because people like this account who have only a high school level or some relatively lower level of education have been more likely to lose their jobs in a pandemic because they don't have the skill set to be able to work from home via the internet. They're typically more hands-on jobs. Not that there's anything wrong with it, it's just less likely to be conserved during a pandemic. So it's not true that Trump wanted you to get back to work. Trump wanted Trump to stay in power and have continuing access to grift opportunities, public money to funnel into his personal businesses, and he stole from the working class and the middle class and gave significant amounts of taxpayer money to the wealthy class via subsidies to their businesses, via PPP payments, millions of dollars to Tom Brady, millions of dollars to Kanye West, millions of dollars to Shake Shack, although Shake Shack returned their $10 million. But that's tip of the iceberg. Most wealthy companies that received taxpayer-funded stimulus payments meant to stop small businesses from going under, they have kept hold of those payments. So you believe that Trump is your champion and the champion of the working class because he flatters you, which just makes you, unfortunately, gullible in a very destructive way. It's not true that liberals live in fear and want to depend on the government forever. It is true that liberals and progressives are more likely to place emphasis on the potential social good of having reliable... Yes, we can do the science experiments now. I'll just say goodbye. Alexandra, so PDX stands for Portland International Airport. Thank you. Hello. Yes, lots of people have authoritarian leanings, particularly if they've been raised and continue in religious faiths, which support patriarchal hierarchies. Get some water? You're going to put the water in a test tube? Fill it up 3/4 full. Do you know how much 3/4 is? No. It's like half, but a bit more. Yeah. Yeah. If you fill them all up that much. All right. So everybody, I'm off, and I'm going to go do science experiments. Probably with detergent, baking soda, vinegar, and food coloring in little test tubes. Because that's fun. That's fun. So wish me luck and take care, all of you. Look, each day that we get to count down that Trump hasn't instigated war with Iran, or Trump hasn't tried to incite more violence in order to evoke a veneer of legitimacy for commencing martial law. Every day without that is a win. I think some of the steam has gone out of the MAGA movement, particularly because of the widespread dissemination of footage of police officers being attacked by Trump supporters with flagpoles, etc.
What else ingredients do we need?
We need some vinegar. And what am I talking about? Disseminating footage of masses and thousands of Trump supporters enthusiastically attacking police officers. That helps undermine the thrust of the Trump argument that they are the protectors of the United States from rioting and looting. They rioted, they looted the Capitol, and they sought to overturn the government and the results of an election. And people in the media have consequently been more likely to take off the gloves in a rhetorical sense and be precise in their messaging that Biden won the election, and not just say Trump claims that the election has been stolen, but to say instead Trump falsely claims the election has been stolen. So yes, well, thanks for your feedback, sweetie. I hope it's given you a little bit of a lift to come here and have a forum to share your thoughts. I've been talking about American politics for a number of years now, and I derive a small income from it, which is cool because I watch a lot of analysis, and I don't always pay money for that, but people pay me money to share my opinions on a regular basis and share my understanding and share my sources that I find interesting on the internet. Can't believe Twitter is free. So yes, I'll go have a lovely day. Thanks, Alan. Take care, everybody, and let's keep it up with the encouragement and the sanity, etc., for the last few days. Only six more days till he's out of office, and the moving vans are no longer photoshopped images. They're real. Let's just at least take a moment to breathe out and enjoy that. Thank you to my moderators, my audience, my supporters, and my Patreons. Take care, everybody. Thanks, Cybergrief. It does. The Patreon does help with the new subscriptions. Now I've got 2. One of them was a Secret Santa gift from a relative, so I didn't have to pay for that. But the other one I have started paying for now. And I'm saving up to buy more electronic equipment to improve the sound quality of the broadcast. Take care. I'm coming soon.